You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from Icons, where listeners are introduced to incredible people working within the law enforcement community who have made a profound impact in our world. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. Welcome to Precinct 444. I'm Christopher Mitchell, the producer of Precinct 444 and manager of digital content and strategy at the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today's series is truly a special one. As we're nearing the end of Pride Month, we here at the Precinct wanted to leave a lasting impression on everyone by releasing the 6 full oral histories of the participants featured in the digital exhibit Experience Pride Behind the Badge, the history of LGBTQIA+ in law enforcement, published today. A link to the exhibit can be found in the episode descriptions from this series. If you're listening to these episodes on the original published date, a companion program is set to air this coming Wednesday, June 28th at 2 p.m. Be sure to register using the link found in the episode descriptions. The purpose behind these projects is to share the often untold stories of LGBTQIA+ and law enforcement through their own words. They come from all walks of life and all types of law enforcement. Episode 4 of this series features Don Mueller. He discusses the crossroads he faced when deciding whether to come out while in law enforcement, and he provides some words of wisdom for those struggling with their own identity. And now for part 4 of Pride Behind the Badge, featuring Don Mueller.
I am the police chief, the chief of police for the Cerritos College Police Department. We're a large-scale college, around 23,000 students in LA County. I joined law enforcement 33 years ago, 1990, quite a while back. I was a lot younger at that time. I came into law enforcement when I was 28. I grew up in a very conservative Christian evangelical home. Mom and dad, one sister, a dog, and I grew up in the church being taught that it's a sin to be gay, basically, that it's an abomination, and if you're gay, you go to hell. When you're young, you believe what you're told, and that made it very difficult for me, extremely difficult growing up. No one ever really identified me as gay. I guess I just didn't fit the stereotypes. I played sports. I had great relationships with friends. I was very popular, kind of ran with the in crowd in high school, junior high and high school. I had girlfriends, mainly because my best friends had girlfriends. And if I wanted to hang out with them, I had to have a girlfriend. So it was kind of the peer pressure thing. I was definitely in denial about my sexual orientation, all growing up through high school and even into college. I had convinced myself, even though I was having thoughts in my head, it's wrong. That's what I was told. This is wrong. And you convince yourself, I can't be gay. If I'm gay, I'm going to hell. I'm not gay. So that was a real struggle for me to come to terms with who I was and who today I believe God created me to be. I did not accept that for a long time. And part of that affected my career choices. Growing up, I loved watching police shows and cop shows on TV. I lived for them. I just thought it was so amazing. But something in the back of my head kept telling me that you can't be a cop. Something's wrong with you. You're gay, could be gay. And it really affected my career choices. I went to UC Irvine, graduated with my degree from the University of California, Irvine. And with the pressure of my parents, went directly into business as a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch. Not where my heart was at, not what I wanted to do, but where I was trying to please my parents, please my family, please my church, do what they thought was right. At age 21, I got married to a woman, my best friend. We were best friends, loved hanging out, but that marriage only lasted 2 years. By the time I was 23, I was coming to terms with the fact that I was not happy and I wasn't the husband she deserved. And I deserved to come home to somebody who I was passionate for too. So we were divorced within 2 years. that's when I started finally coming to terms with who I was and who I'm supposed to be and what makes me happy. I started making changes in my life and decided right around the age of 25 that I've always wanted to be in law enforcement. This is where my heart is at. I started dating for the first time, very closeted, very hidden, but I was acknowledging who I was and who I wanted to be with at the same time. I applied with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in 19 end of 1988, 1989, and at that time, the LA County Sheriff's Department, as with LAPD and every department in Southern California, they would not hire you if you acknowledged the fact that you were gay. They were still firing people who were gay and acknowledged the fact up until 1989, which was the last person who was actually fired. Um, it was basically against policy. There were no protections in the state of California at that time. There was no job protection for sexual orientation. So I was deeply closeted while I was applying for the sheriff's department. However, I guess I didn't fit their stereotype of a gay man anyways. I was involved in church. I had been married. I was divorced. I flew through the application process and through the backgrounds and began my career in law enforcement January of 1990 with the LA County Sheriff's Department, where my dream was, where I'd always wanted to be. I'd always wanted to be a cop. I love the excitement. I love the idea of actually doing something to me that mattered, that could really make a difference in people's lives. What during the academy, I lied about who I was dating. We had large academy classes. Ours was a little over 100 recruits in our academy class. I lied about the girlfriend who I made up, Michelle, who none of the other recruits had ever met, but she was really hot. Let me know. I told everybody how hot she was, but I had to lie about who I was dating, where I went on the weekends, what I did. Um, it was tough. It was very difficult, but I made it through the academy without any issues. The first 2 years on the department were difficult for me, not work-wise. Work-wise, did great, no problem. Emotionally and mentally, they were difficult because I was becoming very secure with who I was and coming to work every day and having to lie about who you were with on the weekend and what you did on the weekend and where you went. And it's tough in law enforcement. This job this isn't like working at J.C. Penney's or at Bank of America or other jobs I've had. People don't get into your personal life. It's not a big deal. Law enforcement is different. We come to work and everybody knows who's dating who. We go to barbecues together. They go to trips to the Colorado River together. But we're a very social career. You can't be a lone ranger in this career. Everybody is very tight. You work together and everybody knows everybody's social life. So when you're gay and trying to hide that fact, or lesbian or trans, God forbid, and trying to hide that in law enforcement, it's a massive amount of stress and pressure. Trying to keep track of the lies. When friends ask, "Hey, what'd you do on the weekend? Where'd you go?" I went here, I went there, I did this. But trying to remember all those lies that you told, so you don't say something different later, and it was taking a toll on me. I was with the department about 2 years when I was reaching a point that I just felt like I should not have to lie anymore. I was a good deputy. I had built a good reputation already, still young in the department, but I was doing well, never had any issues, well liked by all my peers. I just felt like I should be able to come to work and do my job and not have to lie about who I care about and who I go home to on the weekends. I didn't care who their wife was or their girlfriend. I didn't care how they looked. That's their issues. I just care are they going to be able to back me up when we come to work. Our job performance is totally separate from who we love. And I felt like I should be able to be honest and just come to work and do my job. What had actually happened in the sheriff's department and LAPD at the exact same time, both departments had fired officers for being gay in 1989, and both of those officers had filed massive $1 million lawsuits against the departments. Those court cases take quite a bit of time. So I hired in 1990 while those court cases were just starting, and that's why I still had to lie at that time. Both of those court cases, the LAPD and the LA County Sheriff's Department, settled in 1992 when I'd been on the department 2 years. Both of them settled in adding sexual orientation to the non-discrimination policies of both departments. Both of them paid out the officers millions of dollars in settlement fees. It changed the direction of law enforcement in Southern California for sure, and pretty much started to across major parts of the country. Because what happens in the big cities in New York, Chicago, LA tend to have ripple effects across the nation. And it absolutely did. In my career, that made a huge difference. The department, and we're a large department, about 10,000 sworn, who had never had an openly gay deputy in the history, 150 years of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, settled a lawsuit with Bruce Boland, the deputy who had been fired. He never really ended up coming back to work, but it did make changes in our department's policy moving forward. He settled in June, I believe, of 1992. I had been on the department 2 years and was reaching that breaking point that I just didn't want to lie anymore when that lawsuit settled. So 3 months later, I became, I guess, the test case to test if the department really meant what it said when it changed policy. And I made the decision that I was going to acknowledge the fact that I was gay. I wasn't going to sue. I didn't want to show up on talk shows. I just wanted to come to work and do my job like everybody else. But I was scared because nobody had tested this yet. I was afraid I could be fired. Maybe not specifically because I was gay, because it added that to our policy, but they could have fired me for lying during my backgrounds during my hiring process, because I denied being gay during the hiring process. I lied about it because I had to, otherwise I wouldn't have been hired in the first place. But if they wanted an excuse, I handed it to them on a platter. What ended up happening, kind of to cut the story short, is there was political repercussions. The LA County Sheriff's Department patrols the city of West Hollywood, which, as we all know, is one of the strongest LGBTQ political bases in the country. And the city of West Hollywood is a very lucrative contract for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And they were very upset over the firing of Bruce Boland and were considering getting rid of the Sheriff's Department. So my coming out of the closet actually politically helped the department. I didn't care about that part. I just wanted to be me. But the department wanted to show how gay friendly it was in order to appease the city of West Hollywood. That made my path a lot easier coming out on the department. What I have found over the last 33 years, in all honesty, I've had very, very few problems with anybody. The only people I've ever had problems with are deputies or personnel who don't know me. I've had lots of comments about me from people who don't know me, but everybody I've ever worked with, I've never had anything but tremendous support. Never really had problems. Been a great career. It was tough in the beginning, being the first and the only one in a department of 10,000 deputies. It was a little difficult, people staring and kind of freaked out and being the one and only, but change happens. And as we broke the ice, after me came a couple others, and then a few more, and then a few more. And today there are literally hundreds of openly gay, lesbian, and transgender deputies on the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, at least over 300 that are out and open at all ranks, all the way to executive ranks. So we have made change, and things are improving. For those that say things never change, that's a lie. It has absolutely changed. I've lived it. I've seen it. We still have a long ways to go. Not saying there aren't departments out there that are extremely homophobic or transphobic. Absolutely, especially in some of the more rural and smaller parts of our country, some of our more conservative states in the South. I know it's still very difficult. But for a lot of us in the larger metropolitan areas like Los Angeles and New York and Chicago, and San Francisco, um, change has come in a dramatic ways. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has 13 open transgender deputies today that are all doing well. None of them are involved in lawsuits. None of them are fighting for their jobs. They're all performing and progressing and moving forward and doing well. That would not have happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I started. But today is a new day. And it's good to see law enforcement finally coming along and representing our entire community as we should. That we all should be part of law enforcement and welcome.
In our conversation before, you had talked about, I believe that you assisted with or you saw firsthand discrimination training implemented within the LA County Sheriff's Office. I believe that was in 90. I think that was in 95, correct?
That was 95. Yeah, I was the first instructor.
Yeah, and can you talk about
Sure.
how you were involved? You said you were like an instructor there. Like what sort of actual training happened? Because I mean, this was still really early on. They had only created that that policy and their the new policy. It had only been like 3 years old by that point.
As part of the settlement of the lawsuit, Deputy Bruce Boland brought against the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for discrimination of his being fired for being gay. Part of the settlement of that lawsuit also included that the department had to institute training, diversity training, specifically on LGBTQ issues. Back then in the early 90s, we didn't really use the Q a whole lot, and even trans issues weren't brought up a lot. It was pretty much gay and lesbian training at that time. Even within our own community, we hadn't really embraced the full diversity of our entire community. Part of the settlement that we had to start doing legitimate diversity training within the department. So our LA County Sheriff's Department, where I was at the time, decided to institute training on multiple cultural issues, mandatory for all sworn and civilian personnel. I think we had 4 sections. We had a 2-hour course on African American issues, a 2-hour course on Latino issues, a general course that was just a general diversity and Asian Pacific, and then a 2-hour block on gay, lesbian, and a little bit of bisexual, trans issues at that time. That's expanded dramatically today. But at that time, we were pretty on the very cutting edge first level. The department actually brought me in as our first instructor for teaching LGBTQ diversity for the department. And they followed through with it. I give them credit. We actually did training for 16,000 employees. It took, the first round was, I want to say 3 or 4 years of full-time training to get the entire department through. Since that time, the department has kept its commitment, and every recruit class that goes through the academy goes through a 3-hour block on LGBTQ diversity training, where we bring in gay, lesbian, and transgender deputies to speak to the new recruits that are idolizing the people standing in front of them that want the same uniform they're wearing, and see a trans male deputy standing in front of them and talking about his experience transitioning and being identified as female at birth and coming to terms that that's not who he is, and all the difficulties and that brings up for them and having to transition. And then where they're at today, living a successful life as a deputy sheriff. That is a great training experience for our new recruits, because many of them never have the opportunity to sit and actually talk with somebody who's either gay or trans or non-binary, and to hear another deputy's, one of their peers, who actually not a peer, superior, somebody they're looking up to because they haven't even graduated at that point, but to be able to hear their personal story, the goods, the pains, the difficulties, to connect with them and identify with them, that helps them become a better officer, and a better deputy, because when they go out in the field, they're going to be working with people who are trans and gay and lesbian, and they need to have at least some understanding and some compassion and some ability to connect with those individuals that they're going to have to be working with in the field as victims or going to calls on. They're going to be having to assist them and help them find resources, find ways to solve their problems. So it was the beginning of training for LA County Sheriff, and I know LAPD started pretty much almost synchronous near the same time period that we did. And today still continues, just as the Sheriff's Department does. LAPD continues with every academy class today in training. That has been a huge beginning. It doesn't change everybody. We all know that. But you got to have to start somewhere. You've got to start at least with the training. What we have tried to do in those trainings is not just give facts, not give information, because what we learned is that doesn't change people's hearts. What we try and do those classes is give our recruits an actual experience, give them a chance to get to know us as people, to be vulnerable, to open up and talk about what it was like with family growing up, what it was like in our own individual terms, coming to terms with who we are. We talk about the good things and the bad, the pain that we went through and the joys. We hope to give them an experience that they get to know us personally, because what we have found is that's what changes people. That's what changes our new police officers and our new deputy sheriffs, is when they sit with somebody who's non-binary and hears our story. When they sit with one of us who's gay and hear my story, and then we connect. And that's how we help them truly grow and become a better person and a better police officer and deputy sheriff when they're out in the field. Not by just giving them facts about Stonewall. Those are important, of course, but it's more than a history lesson. It's an experience to get to know us. And that was a great beginning. Back in 1995, I think, was our very first class, and it continues till today. Every single academy class. I left the Sheriff's Department 3 years ago to accept this position as the Chief of Police for Cerritos College. And now I'm teaching for the Orange County Sheriff's Department because they've asked me to come speak to their recruits as a chief, as an openly gay chief. So I'm down there they don't have as many classes as LA County, but they run recruit classes about one every 2 months. And I always accept. And if I can work it in my calendar, I never say no, because I know how important that is and the effect that it can have on our new officers, our new deputies that are out in the field, responding to calls, responding to screams for help. And many of those screams are from members of our own community, the LGBTQ community. They deserve an officer who understands them, who's compassionate, or maybe is actually part of the community. We want all those new recruits to know they can be who they are. They don't have to hide like I did in the early years, that they can just live their lives honestly, openly, and that's what makes them a better peace officer as a whole. And for those who aren't part of the community, to help them be a little more compassionate, understanding, and help them grow as an individual. Together, it helps all of us, and it makes us better departments and help protect our communities in much more effective ways. The LGBTQ diversity training that we've been doing in law enforcement has definitely changed over the years. And a lot of that has kind of been, in honesty, trial and error, trying to determine what actually works and what's effective. And sometimes making some missteps and getting a lot of pushback and realizing, oh, that's not the way to move forward with this training. I think in the early training back in 1995, 96, when we were first starting, it was much more of a maybe gay and lesbian history lesson a little bit, talking about some of the history, Stonewall, the whole AIDS crisis through the 80s and early 90s, talking about the history of law enforcement in the gay community and why many in the community are fearful of law enforcement, some of the harassment that had gone throughout the country for the last 100 years and still continues even today sometimes. Talked a lot about that, but it was more of a history lesson, kind of, as I think where we started with training. what we began to realize is we got a lot of pushback from that. We didn't see a lot of what we believed was real change in our new officers. We didn't see it as being effective in changing hearts and minds. And in honesty, we spoke with a lot of our officers who are like African American or Muslim, who had experienced many of the same type of things and have been doing diversity training and trying to find out what they felt was really working also, because they get the same kind of pushback. But what we learned is people who are racist tend to be homophobic. If they're homophobic, they tend to be sexist. It's the same people that we're dealing with. How do you change hearts and minds? I think today what we have learned gradually over time is the more that, well, one, we stopped bringing in outside instructors. We used to bring in a lot of outside instructors from the community that didn't really know law enforcement, and law enforcement didn't know them. And a lot of those classes were very confrontational, tough, a lot of yelling in classes. The officers felt like they were having some kind of a liberal agenda pushed down their throats, that the departments didn't really support this, but they just were giving in to outside political pressure. We had members from the community who had had bad experiences with law enforcement, but didn't understand the issues that they deal with, that came in accusing the cops of being homophobic, even if they weren't, but just assumed that all officers were homophobic. It just set for a very contentious scenario from the beginning. Over time, as we had more and more officers coming out and able to come out, the more we were able to either work hand in hand with a community member or have the officer themselves conducting the training. That helped tremendously, because we found the other officers and other deputies were far less resistant from the beginning to a partner in uniform teaching who understands them. We also began to change our training, that it became a lot less historical, a lot less informational, and a lot more, I don't even know the words, personal. It became more, I don't know how to put it, like show and tell, get to know me. We would open up our lives, which is hard as an instructor because you've got to be vulnerable. But we would talk about what it was like growing up and coming to terms ourselves with being gay or trans or lesbian. We talked about our families and coming out to our families and how hard that was for some of us. And some of us got rejected, and we talked about the rejection, talked about work and why. Because one of the biggest questions we get from other officers is, why do you have to make an issue of it? Why do you have to even say that you're gay or you're lesbian? It's nobody's business. Why don't you just keep it to yourself? Well, they don't keep to themselves that they have a wife or they're going to their kids' softball games. In fact, they talk about it every day. There's pictures of their wife on their desk, like I have my husband's picture on my desk today. None of us hide our personal lives. That's just not who we are. We come to work and we are social. But for others they don't realize what they're asking of us as gay and lesbian and transgender officers. They're asking us to hide our entire personal life when they come and ask us what we did on the weekend, but then don't come out to me. You want me to be honest, but you don't. So in the class, we bring that up, how it's so difficult to have to lie, why it's so difficult to have to remain in the closet in a sense, and why it's almost impossible to be a successful officer and not be true to who you are, not truly be honest and just open and transparent. So in those classes today, the transition and how we teach, we are far more transparent. We talk about our own lives. We talk about our personal. We give them a chance to get to know us in class, to ask questions. When I teach a class, it is very back and forth conversational. I do not sit up and talk. I talk to them about who in your family, how many of you have members in your family who are either gay or lesbian or transgender? Who is that? How does your family feel about that? How are they treated within your family? Are there members that don't agree with it? We have an open conversation in the class. And you get multiple points of view, and you have to be secure enough as an instructor to handle that, and that's okay. We have diversity, and that's okay. But what we have found is teaching from that viewpoint and from that starting point of just giving them a chance to get to know us personally. We've seen much more dramatic actual change in our officers moving forward, many of them. You can't reach everybody. You're always going to have a few idiots who are just always going to be the way, probably until they get fired. um, but we get many, many, many officers and deputies, new recruits that come up after class nowadays. They're just saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much for that. My brother is gay and I've never been able to talk to him about it. And oh, you helped me understand so much better. And we just get incredible. We get emails weeks, months, years later from people saying thank you when their son or daughter comes out and talking about, I remember when I sat in your class and you helped me, and I don't know how I would ever handle my daughter today if you hadn't helped talk to me years ago. Um, the classes are far more effective when we just share who we are and honest who we are. And that is good for law enforcement. That's good for our departments because it creates a better working environment for all of us together. Um, Brings down the amount of hostile workplace type things. It helps our officers who are not part of the community be more sensitive about their choices of words, their pronoun usage for others. They are much more conscientious that jokes are not appropriate, and now they know why. It makes us better agents, better law enforcement agencies as a whole on how we treat the community and how we treat each other. So yeah, the training has changed dramatically. And I personally believe today much for the better. Today, the majority of our classes in honesty, we focus more on trans issues than we do gay and lesbian. Most of the young people don't have a problem with gay and lesbian people anymore. They've grown up. They all have friends who are gay or lesbian. They all had clubs in their high schools. None of us, we didn't have that when we were kids, but today they do. Today, the cutting edge issues are still trans and non-binary issues. So we spend a lot more of the class time talking about those issues and bringing in some of our officers who are trans or non-binary and let them share their stories and their struggles and their successes with the new recruits, because for most of the younger generation, that seems to be the true battle of the future of where we're at. There's always going to be bias and discrimination out there, but for the most part, we've really succeeded, at least in our major metropolitan areas, on the gay and lesbian forefront. Most departments just don't have issues, major issues, like they used to with it. You'll have individuals, but almost every major department in the country has openly gay and lesbian officers, deputies, federal agents everywhere now. Our trans brothers and sisters and our non-binary brothers and sisters and siblings are the ones on the forefront today. So that's where we're focusing most of our training today in 2023. That's where we still need to continue to fight, because in many parts of the country, that is still very difficult for people to be honest about who they are and be in law enforcement.
The training went from lectures of trying to say you need to accept LGBTQ individuals within law enforcement, and then it shifted from lectures of just trying to cram information into people's brains that no, hey, you just don't understand what they're going through, and it's creating, those vulnerable conversations where they're being open and they're able to share what they went through, and you're humanizing
That's exactly
other
it.
people.
It's almost like when we went through the gay marriage thing, people try to give out facts why it should be okay, and that didn't work until couples started going on doing commercials. They started seeing gay couples and seeing people. You have to humanize it. I remember some of the first training lectures we did. We were still using overhead projectors then, but I had all these overhead slides, pictures of explaining what the pink triangle meant, and the rainbow flag, because a lot of them didn't even know what that was in, and the lambda symbol, which was big back then, and some of the history, the stone wall and the years, and putting all those items up. It was far more informational. It's something you would have seen nowadays on Wikipedia somewhere looking up. Um, we really got away from that completely, and tried to make it, well, we asked, if you're racist and you can't stand Black people, trying to tell somebody who's racist all the facts about slavery and about discrimination and Jim Crow laws, and that doesn't change somebody at all.
Right.
What changes people is when
Exactly.
they become friends with somebody.
Hmm.
And when all of a sudden you sit down with somebody and you become friends, and this person is of a color or a religion or an orientation that up until now you hated, but all of a sudden you actually like having dinner with them. They're actually fun. And you can
Yeah,
actually laugh together. And you
it's like
actually can relate to some of their stuff. And it's like, oh my
yeah,
God, I felt that way before. And then all of a sudden you make connection. And that's what changes people. Not the facts are still important. No question. You don't want to forget the history, and we need to, but to change hearts and minds, you got to become friends with someone. So in a 3-hour class, we try to do that in a small way possible. We try to make connection and be vulnerable and be real and get them to laugh and get them to maybe a few classes, once in a while they cry, but get them to connect emotionally. And what we have found is that those classes tend to by far be way more effective. It's not your typical schooling method. It doesn't fit. If you want tests with answers, and a lot of times that's what the states want, post here wants, and can they answer all the questions correctly to show that they learned the material? But that's not what changes people. What we found is most effective, if we really want to do a better job at policing and relating to our community and serving our communities and working together with each other, is we've got to build connection with them and give them a chance to connect to us as deputies, officers, and agents that are maybe from a community that they have not ever connected to before, or had the opportunity to actually sit down and talk to somebody, not just watch them on Jerry Springer. So that's where we've gone with the training, and many of our departments, or bigger departments, have gone to that style of training, because we found it's become much more effective internally. And even on a small scale, at least it's a beginning. Get your foot in the door, that they'll be maybe listen again. Because a lot of people, I don't know, I realize this because of my family, because I grew up in a family that massive stereotypes of LGBTQ people, because it was taught to us by our pastor, by our church. I mean, my parents truly believed all gay people were child molesters, that all gay people end up on drugs. Everybody will die from AIDS because it's judgment from God. It's not because of it's an illness, it's judgment. They believed all kinds of insane stereotypes. You can't be successful and be gay or lesbian because you're going down a path that's outside of God's will, and that your life will end up in destruction, and you'll always be lonely, and there's no true love except for this one path with a man and a woman. That's the only way you can find true love. It took a long time with my own family to break those stereotypes, and help them learn, help them realize that a lot of those things weren't true. They had to get to see me as for who I really was, and my relationship, and today with my husband, and see us together, and see us laugh together and cry together and travel on vacations together, and realize we have the same kind of loving relationship and same kind of difficulties and paying bills and doing laundry that everybody else does. But somehow they had this stereotype that we are always going to be partying and using drugs. And no, we go to Costco, we go to the dry cleaners, just like everybody else. And sometimes the weekends are boring. um, but if my family had to take time to learn that, how can I expect anything different from other recruits or other officers that I work with? I've got to give them time and the ability and the opportunity to get to know me, get to know us, to help them understand that those are stereotypes that they have been taught their whole lives, and they're not true. I mean, there are people in the gay community that have issues and or use drugs, of course. And there's straight people that use drugs. And there's we all do. We have good and bad in every community in every section of our society. Um, but we have to let them see the full spectrum of who we are. So I guess I just understand that because it took my own family time to understand. It took me time to come to terms. I didn't come to terms with who I was till I was in my mid-20s. My parents, I didn't tell them till I was coming out of work till I was almost 28, 30, and it took them years to come to terms. They even shut me off for several years and didn't talk to me for 5 or 6 years because they felt I had turned my back on God. I was going down a horrible, destructive path. And then they saw that didn't happen, but they had to see that. So can't expect any more from my coworkers, my peers, than I do from my own family. So I need to give them time to know me, to know us, to break their stereotypes, to ask their tough questions. That's how we grow.
Were there times during your career that made you consider leaving the field? And if so, what made you decide to stay?
Not really. I think the only time is right before I came out, and it was just dealing with the fear of what was going to happen if I came out. And then there was those brief thoughts of just trying to avoid that, maybe quitting or doing something else because of fear of the unknown with what would happen. When after I came out, and to my surprise, realized I had a tremendous amount of support from other deputies that publicly came out supporting me, that made an issue of it, that called me at home to tell me that I was insane, but I had a lot of guts. They said it kind of more in a crude manner, but that they respected me for the guts that I had to come out. That alleviated those fears for the most part pretty rapidly. I've never really considered giving up. I've since that time, way back, 1992, since I've been able to be honest, I've been able to help so many people, and that's what I went into this career for. I had the opportunity, the blessing to actually work in a very predominant gay community in West Hollywood. For 12 years, I worked patrol in West Hollywood. And I went to numerous calls of other gay couples, gay individuals who had either were fighting as a couple, or individuals considering committing suicide or attempting suicide, or dealing with addiction issues. And I was able to help so many of them just by being honest. When the cop who shows up at your house at 3 a.m. shows up and they're ready to kill themselves, and that cop himself, when I could say to him, hey, you deserve better than this. I'm gay also. I get it. I understand. And when they hear a cop say that they're gay, their eyes just explode, and they're like, they can't believe it. And then you're able to actually get them help and listen. And there's literally been dozens, probably more than that, of young, I say kids, but they're not kids. I'm just getting old, but 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds that I literally have probably been able to save their lives. The couple that I did literally save their life. And that is why I became a gun. Because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something that really could help people. There's enough people that put on a uniform out there that are power hungry or crazy or doing this career for the wrong reasons. I went in it because I want to make a difference. I want to be able to go home at night and feel like I did something that changed somebody's life, that saved somebody's life. I want to go home and feel that I contributed and really do help at times where nobody else can. I'm the one that's there at 3 a.m. when the screaming and the glass is breaking and people are ripping the phones out of the walls, and that's when you can really help too. That's when people are in crisis, at their worst, or in the most need, to feel their safety has been shattered, and they need somebody to come along and help them feel secure again and feel safe again, and help get them on a path that they can start putting their life back together. And I'm able to do that in this career. And I love it. Absolutely love it. Today, there's no question. Other than winning the lottery, I don't know anything else I would want to do. If I have to work, this is what I want to do for my career and my life. And I'm very happy with the career choice I made. I would never have changed a thing.
Do you have any advice for new LGBTQ plus officers and those thinking of becoming law enforcement professionals?
Yeah. Any young people or individuals out there thinking about changing their career that are gay, trans, or lesbian, non-binary, queer, first of all, absolutely do not hesitate on going into law enforcement. There are many, many amazing opportunities where you can succeed, do well, and have an incredible career. Absolutely. However, do your research on what department you're applying with to start with, because we do have many departments in this country and many parts of this country where it is far more difficult than others being queer in this industry. That's just the reality. There are some incredible small departments out there that are already progressive and supportive and welcoming. And there's a lot of big departments that are, and there's some that are still bad. So do your research, talk to any other officers that you may know that are gay, lesbian, trans. Do some research online, see if that department has an LGBTQ liaison. Call them, talk to them, ask them what they think about you joining or hiring. Do your research a little bit on what department you decide to go to. And then from a personal note, just be you and be honest. Don't live in the closet and don't live in denial. All it does is tear you up from the inside. And I know, because I did that the first several years of my career, and it made it that much harder to come out later and to have to change that. If you can just be honest from the beginning, people will respect you. What I've learned in law enforcement, cops, if we were to stereotype law enforcement, yes, law enforcement tends to be very traditional, not open to new things and new ideas. But the one thing cops hate is weakness among each other, because you have to be strong, you have to be courageous, you have to be able to depend on your partners to be there for you. If a cop believes another officer is weak, it's like sharks with blood in the water. You're dead. But even if you're gay or trans or female, but strong, there's a level of respect that you gain instantly in law enforcement. And there's a lot of those old timers out there that'll still respect you just for the strength of being who you are and be able to stand up. They know they're LGBTQ officers in their departments. They know that. The ones who hide tend to be the ones who have problems and get disrespected. The ones who are courageous and just honest and strong enough to be proud of themselves and stand up for who they are, not obnoxious, but just confident in who they are, those are the ones who tend to do extremely well and be respected for that. Because we all know we're all different. We're all different. Nobody is exactly the same. Everybody has different religious and spiritual upbringings, different cultural upbringings and traditions, different holiday celebrations. And we all go home to people who look differently than us. Who we love varies dramatically across the board. They all know that. So just be proud of who you are. Be secure with who you are. and do a good job. Go out there and be a good police officer, and work, and you will do well, and you'll succeed in this career.
Is there anything else you would want people to know about your experience?
I don't know if we didn't really talk a lot about it, but our experience really isn't much different than others that have had issues, cultural, Muslims in the department. We went through that area. Trump was anti-Muslim. Muslims in law enforcement were all looked on as like they're terrorists. Blacks have had the same issues in law enforcement forever. I don't know if that really needs to be brought up, the similarities. But we really are in a mutual struggle just for true equality and inclusion for all of us.
Right. It's all part of, discrimination change.
It honestly is.
Yeah.
It's truly it. I mean, there are some that get it a little harder than others, but it's all the mutual fight for true equality and inclusion, and understanding that there are good and bad officers who are Muslim. There are good and bad officers who are gay. There are good and bad officers who are Latino and that are Filipino and white. And there's good and bad in every community. And we truly need to let go of the previous preconceptions and the biases and the stereotypes, and be open to understand we all have a place. And we need all of us to be effective as police departments, because the community is diverse. And if we don't reflect the community we're serving, we're going to have issues big time. And we've seen that with departments that are all white and all Black communities, and it doesn't work. Even if you do the best job possible, it's just the perception and the visual that gives off. We're going to serve a community and be an effective police department, and not have communities demanding defunding and reductions in policing and massive change. We need to be reflective of our entire community across the board, all of it, as a department too. So I need to have partners. I try to do that in our department here as much as I can. I don't have a big department, but I have officers who are Latino, Black, and Asian. My last hire, he was Vietnamese. I have now two that are openly gay. I don't have enough women in my department. We're too small. I've only got a couple women. I need a little bit more. But I honestly try to have a department that's reflective of the college that we serve on our campus and our students, so that our students see officers that look like them, that they understand can relate to them, and that they feel safe coming to and talking to because of previous things they've seen or experiences that they had. Some of our students of color might just see me without knowing me and not feel comfortable talking to a white chief or a white officer. They might feel more comfortable with one of my officers who has a darker skin tone because of their previous experiences they've had. So we try to be really reflective, diverse across our department, to be an effective department for the students on this campus, so they truly know they are understood and they are seen and respected, because the officer they're talking to may look just like them. So diversity is important. It's across the board. This isn't just a gay issue. Absolutely not. It is a much broader issue of, are we going to be inclusive, or are we going to go backwards?
Times have changed, that's for sure. And I wonder if we can actually go back to your earlier days in law enforcement, when you had helped create Guns and Hoses, the sort of social club and social outlet for LGBTQ officers.
When I was still just started on the sheriff's department and still living very, very closeted, we developed a strong support network of those of us who were police officers and deputy sheriffs and firefighters who were gay. We had a sort of underground network that we would socialize. It started out with just pool parties at a few friends' houses, and those of us that knew each other, all personal invites. Eventually, myself and one of the other deputies from the LA County Sheriff's Department, we formed the first official unofficial social group of gay and lesbian police officers and deputy sheriffs and firefighters. And we called it Guns and Hoses. That was back in early 1990. And we would hold parties, private, kind of secret parties out in Palm Springs. We'd rent a hotel for the weekend and we'd all bring our partners or friends or date for the weekend. And we would have closed, secure, invitation only parties, getaways to the Colorado River, pool parties at people's houses, barbecues. It was actually a really lot of fun and a great organization, because at that time none of us were out, and the only support we had was each other behind the scenes, very secretive. But it did help us realize we were not alone, and it helped us begin to gain strength together, which gave those of us that finally eventually started coming out of the closet a few years later, I think that's where we got a lot of our strength, at least, because we knew we weren't the only ones. I knew, probably 50 other deputies. I knew sergeants. I knew a captain on our department who was gay because of Guns and Hoses and that organization. Over the years, that organization transitioned over the next several years from being only a social organization to being a little bit more politically involved with the departments, fighting for domestic partnership, fighting for healthcare benefits, because we had none of those at that time. The organization transitioned names several times over the years. I think we went from Guns and Hoses to Pride Behind the Badge when we actually formed a 501c3. Then eventually it became the Golden State Peace Officers Association, because we kind of merged together with San Francisco. And then it came the Gay Peace Officers Association, GPOA. So it's transitioned over the last 20 years. And gotten more involved in things like support and training, getting legal representation for officers who needed support and help. Those organizations help serve as liaisons to police chiefs, who we've had to sometimes encourage to do training within their department. Some chiefs are clearly more open and supportive than others. And sometimes we, as an organization, have had to sort of represent some of their officers who are still closeted and make contact with their departments and their chiefs to push their progress forward a little bit. But it's always served a social function of a support network for many of our people who just may not be ready or feel they're able to be honest and open about who they are yet. They've been great organizations over the years. Guns and Hoses was probably our funnest one, just because of the name, because we were cops and firemen. We had a lot of fun with that. But those organizations really served a great benefit to those of us in the departments, especially when we had to live in the closet, because they gave us the support of friendship and laughter and just an outlet where we could be free and talk to people that understood us, that do the same job we do, and we could and are going through the same fears of being found out that we were living with. So they were great organizations. I sometimes miss those days. They were some good days. We had some great logos because of the names, so it was a lot of fun. If you are LGBTQ or anywhere on this, within the continuum and under this umbrella, do not let that hold you back. If your heart or interest is anywhere in the law enforcement field, whether it's being an officer on the street or it's in crime lab investigations or detective work or backgrounds, or we can do anything we want, and we legitimately can today. Do not let what others have said about our community or about you hold you back. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of who God created you to be, and go out there and just do a damn good job. And you can change the world and have a lot of fun at it at the same time.
That was part 4 of the Pride Behind the Badge series featuring Don Mueller. We hope you'll take some time to explore our digital exhibit, Experience Pride Behind the Badge, the history of LGBTQIA+ and law enforcement. Remember, the companion program for the digital exhibit will air live on YouTube this Wednesday, June 28th at 2 p.m. The register link is in the episode description. We hope you found this conversation enlightening and will join us again for another edition of Icons, where we introduce listeners to incredible people working within law enforcement who have had a profound impact on the community. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. The Icon series is not just about contemporary figures in the law enforcement community, but about all of those who have served their communities and the world, from now and in the past. Be sure to tune back in with us for future Icons episodes exclusively on Tuesdays every month to learn about key figures in American law enforcement history. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the Precinct.